What is up, Sandals Youth and everyone at all of our campuses? My name is Scotty. I'm the youth lead at our Woodcrest campus, and I'm excited to be jumping into week 2 of Kingdom Workers, where we are talking all about serving. Yes, serving. And last week, if you were here, we asked this question: if the heart of Jesus is service, how close is your heart to Jesus' heart? Now, last week we talked about the why of serving, and today we're going to be talking about how to serve, and we want to challenge you and maybe even push you into some uncomfortable, awkward areas in what it looks like to serve. But before we start, I want to tell you about a story that happened last week. So I'm married to my beautiful wife, Mandy. We have a son named Owen who's almost 2 in December, and Mandy was going out of town, and let me just say this: Mandy is good at cooking food. She's good at keeping up and cleaning, and your boy likes a good cooked meal at home. And she was leaving, so she wanted to prepare and she wanted to set me up for success being with Owen, right? So she made a list. She made sure all the food was taken care of. It was packaged. It was great. The list of cleaning the dishes, taking out the trash, taking care of Owen, and gave me the list before she left. And so I read it, I looked over it, and I said, great, this sounds good. And so she left for a few days, and then she came home. She came home to me on the Xbox, playing Xbox, and Owen was running around. He had spaghetti sauce in his hair. He's naked, running around, covered in mud, and just running with scissors, I think. I think he had scissors in his hand, and he was running with those dishes stacked up in the sink, trash is overflowing, and Mandy looks at me and she goes, Scotty, what the heck? It smells like caca in here. Like, what did you do? Did you not get the list that I left you with? And I said, of course I got the list. I looked it over, and she's like, well, did you actually read it? And I'm like, of course I read it. And I'll take it one step further. I memorized it. You told me to do this at first, and then you told me to do this second, and then do this third. And she said, well, then why does it look like this? Now, in all reality, you hear that story and you think, Scotty, you are a terrible human being. That story did not happen at all. I'm not that crazy or awful, but how often do we approach Jesus in this same way when he tells us to do something a little uncomfortable, when he tells us to serve others, or even when he tells us to stand out and stand up for something, right? Most of us know what we should do, but we don't do it. When it comes to serving other people, when it comes to being a real, true life, authentic kingdom worker, one who is serving the kingdom of God rather than serving our own selfish kingdoms. And there's one thing that we need to grasp, and is our first point for tonight. So if you have a pen or you love to write things down, we need to grasp this idea. There is a huge difference in knowing what to do and actually doing it. There is a huge difference in knowing what to do than actually doing it. I mean, how many of you know what Jesus calls you to? If you are a follower of Jesus, you know what he calls you to, but when he calls you to step up, it's just silent. No motion, no movement in what you're doing, right? James 4:17 says this, and I want you to listen to this very carefully. James 4:17 says, remember, it is a sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it. It is a sin to know what to do, but not to do it. And how many of us do this on a daily basis, right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be with the things that Jesus calls us to, right? One of the things for you could be, you know you should do your chores and listen to your parents, but you don't. And then you're grounded for 3 weeks, and then you can't go hang out with your friends, and you can't go to the movies and go see Joker or whatever the cool movie is, right? Some of you know you should do your homework or study so you could pass your class, or maybe get into the college that you desire to be in, but yet you don't do it, and you end up failing the class. And we do this all the time with God too. We know what God calls us to, but we ignore it and go on with our lives. So what do we do? What does it look like to be a kingdom worker, to serve? And Jesus, I believe, sums it up in 2 ways. And we're going to look at this in Mark 12. It's with him and a religious leader of the time. And Jesus is teaching, and this religious leader asks him a simple question. And this is Jesus' response in Mark 12, picking up in verse 28. And it'll be on the screen for you. It says, one of the teachers of religious law was standing there listening to the debate. He realized that Jesus had answered well. So he asked, of all the commandments, which is the most important? Out of all the things that Jesus could have said, this is what he responds with. He says, Jesus replied, the most important commandment is this: listen, O Israel, The Lord our God is the one and only Lord, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind and all your strength. And he doesn't stop there. He says the second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. So to sum it up for you, to make it easy for you, God says love God. Jesus says love God and love others. Right? Love God with everything, your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love others. These two things go hand in hand. Oftentimes we try to split and divide the two. We think, man, I could love God, but I'm not going to focus on loving others. But these two actually go hand in hand, right? And we know this. If you've been in the church, if you've gone to Sunday school, or if you know this, you've heard this before, and we call it this little term called the golden rule, right? Anyone ever heard the golden rule before? But the question I have for us as we talk about actually loving God and loving others and serving, what keeps us from doing either of these two? And I think I could sum it up in one word, and it's you, right? It's you, it's me. We get in the way of serving others all the time. And here's the hardest part about being a kingdom worker. It's not about you. It's not about you, it's not about me. We don't serve because most of the time we think because we think more so about our comforts and ourselves all the time, right? We don't serve because we would rather do something that is more comfortable, that's less awkward, right? Or maybe we're scared. Maybe some of you are fearful of what that may entail for you being on a school campus, being in your family, right? Scared of what you might have to give up. You may have to give up something so you could pursue and serve. Right? You may be scared of being awkward, right? I'm awkward most of the time. Some of us are awkward. There are awkward conversations that come out of serving. Maybe some of you are scared of what God might call you to next. Maybe God has something even bigger for you that you don't know, and you're scared of what that could be for you. Maybe you're scared of looking too extreme on your campus or on your sports team or whatever that may look like. And Jesus once said this. He says, where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. We choose not to serve because we're afraid to give something up, right? We decide, man, if I'm going to serve, if I'm going to do this thing, then I don't want to give this up. I don't want to give my status up. I don't want to give my friendship up. So therefore, I'm not going to choose to serve. Look, if you are a follower of Jesus, you know what types of loving your neighbor as yourself type things you should be doing. You know this, right? You've gotten the laundry list, you got the to-do list, and you know what Jesus called you to do. But what we need to do is which is the second point, we need to move past the scared phase and go into the doing phase, right? We need to Nike it, just do it. Move from the scared phase and go into the doing phase. Because again, there's a big difference in knowing what to do and actually doing it. And the truth is, and I'm not saying this to scare anyone tonight, but the truth is serving is serious business. Jesus did not mess around when he called his followers to serve, to step outside of themselves. It's not just this thing that we could pick and choose when we look at what Jesus has called us to. Jesus actually warns those who don't understand this concept. Now, I'm going to be honest with you before we jump into this passage. It's a little bit long, but it's really eye-opening to what Jesus is trying to illustrate here about serving. So what I want to challenge you to do is as I read through it, I want you to put your phones down. I want your eyes up here, locked in at whatever campus you're at. And I want you to look at the verses that come up on the screen. And I want you to follow along and listen to what Jesus illustrates when he talks about the severity of what it looks like to serve. And it says this in Matthew 25, picking up in verse 31. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit upon his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Now, Jesus is illustrating a point here. He's saying the people on his right were the ones who said, man, I served you. I was with you, Jesus. I listened to the to-do list that you gave me. And he continues on, he says, then these righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Jesus is driving home the point of serving. When you serve other people, it's as though you're doing it for him. And he continues on, then the king will turn to those on the left and say, away with you, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his demons. For I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me a drink. I was a stranger and you didn't invite me into your house. I was naked and you didn't give me any clothing. I was sick and in prison and you didn't visit me. Then they will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger or naked or sick in prison and not help you? And he will answer, I tell you the truth, when you refuse to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me. Now, I told you it's pretty intense, but Jesus takes serving, he doesn't hold it lightly. He has called us to step outside of ourselves and serve one another. There's a seriousness in being a kingdom worker. It's not like we say, man, I'm just a Christian and it's great and I could cross that off the list, but God is calling us to something even bigger and serving other people as being kingdom workers. And it's not about you. It's about God and serving others in the process. Now, I want to end by asking you a tough question. Simply this: what are you doing? What are you doing? If I were to determine how well you loved God by just looking at how well you are serving others, how much would be showing? If I were to look at your life, if I were to follow you around school, if I were to be around you with your family, not in a weird way, but just saying, if I were to see your life, like, would it show that you are serving people and have a heart like Jesus does? Now tonight, we want to help you move from knowing to doing. We want to help you take those steps. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be giving out what we call these kingdom worker cards. And your youth host, your youth lead is going to come up and they're going to walk you through what that looks like. But I want to challenge you in taking one of those kingdom worker cards and actually stepping outside of your comfort zone and doing and serving and actually taking the to-do list that God has given you and called you to and serving others and actually living it out. So I'm going to hand it back over to your youth leader, youth host. I hope you have a great time in group. And this week, you would step outside of yourself and serve other people. See you later.